So we need a volunteer to make notes. I have hard time of choosing between all these hands showing up for a I can also volunteer someone, so either way. All right, let's get started. So this is an IETF 96 Berlin and DMM District Mobility Madness meeting. And let's get started. So welcome. First, pay attention to a note well. You should be pretty much aware of it. If you are not, just go to the meeting materials and read the agenda. I have included the note well in it, or Tapping has. So still we need a note taker. Anyone wanting to volunteer? Or okay, thank you, Sel. All right. So
hello, I'm the Jabber scribe. So please make sure you have your name tag on and that both sides are not obscured by any kind of paper or something you put in there, because I'll be typing out your names and trying to spell them right and put them in a Jabber room so the minute taker can get the name right on in the minutes. Thanks.
Great. So this is the agenda for today. So for a long time we actually have pretty loose agenda. So a couple of presentations, I have updated the links, so if you go, so you can have the materials. Anything to add or change in the agenda? So now it's the time if you have any views. So basically we will go through the DMM side of the working group. So we have a couple of updates of the existing documents, what we have in a working group and in the working teams.
Shrigandavali, how about the adoption for WT4 work item?
If you look in the
okay.
Yeah. So after we have completed the DMM side of the agenda, we have some of the maintenance stuff. So we have Charlie to speak, give an update on the MN IDs, and then we go looking into the other stuff. So a couple of things. We have few documents that have been lingering around that are in the in our milestones. So as part of the kind of clean the table and get the things done. So we have a couple of calls for the adoption. And once we have done that, to kind of get the sense of the room, we also discuss about the next steps of the working group. So I'll just go through the where we stand at the moment, so the document status. So these are the currently available working group documents what we have. So MNIDs have been in the last call. We will see here the update from Charlie later on today, but the most likely that document will move into ISG, so I will put that out of the working group as soon as possible. We will hear about the CPDP, the update. There's no document update, but these guys have been working during this week very hard and prior, doing a lot of offline discussions before the meeting. So I think they have something interesting to share with the rest of the working group. HNP RENAM, that document went through the last call. It's pending for the proto write-up, so it's going to move out of the working group. LMA controlled MAC parameters also went through the last call. It's now pending for the edges to do the proto write-up, so it will move to the ESG. MAC multi-homing, so it's a working group document, so I'll put that into the working group last call so that we can finally get rid of it. It should be pretty straightforward. So it has had a couple of earlier reviews and we have reflected all the comments that we received, so it should be in the right track. And then we have on-demand mobility, so we will hear also an update about that. And if there's nothing controversial after today's presentation, that will also go for the move forward. Then we have these two documents, candidates for the working group IDs. So we have the distributed mobility anchoring. So we will hear the update from the this working team, from Anthony. And the also working stream 4, they have published the deployment models document, so we will make also a kind of adoption call for that. And so pretty much to the complete the milestones what we have. So we will return to this milestone part and the what to do next and that part. But once we have moved out the work that we have now in as working group documents, and get these couple of missing pieces adopted and moved forward, we have pretty much cleaned our existing milestones, and the this is kind of sign for us that the we need to think about what to do next when we grow up. Okay. All right. So then let's go back to the actual agenda. So the first thing for today is the update of the FPC. So I think it's Marco who is going to give the update, right?
This is to proceed on the slides as well?
If you need the laser sword, okay. It has. I will show up the slide, so just say me when you want to.
Okay. All right. So this is a brief update of the FPC work.
Oops, not this one. This one.
That looks good. Yeah. So it was originally called Forwarding Path and Signaling Management. We call it just FPC, Forwarding Path Control. Next slide. Just in brief, what's that about? So DMM has a lot of work. So this particular work item is about the separation of a mobility gateway's control plane from its data plane. Per the DMM objectives, it enables the distribution of control plane functions independently of data plane functions. So you have a lot of flexibility here. And this work is in particular about the functional architecture, which we deploy in between the control plane and the data plane, and the semantics that apply in between these functional elements to allow operation of mobility management and whatever is required here. Next slide. So in brief, what's the progress since last IETF? So we did not update version 3, which doesn't sound like a lot of progress. In fact, in version 3, which was pretty pretty busy in terms of operational description, messaging. In the appendix, we also had a young model. It was not very sound in having two operational models. I will have a slide next that may make you remind what was happening since version 3. So it was not very sound to have two operational modes, which we supported at that point in time. Some features per the model, which we considered for, in particular, mode 1, lacked some well, features like session representation, which we would like to fix. So at last IETF meeting, Satoru presented a first idea of how to bring these both operational modes together and enable a lot of flexibility by a common data model, which we would briefly like to introduce today. The team, since last IETF, made quite some progress, in particular during this face-to-face meeting. We met a couple of times to drive this work ahead. And now we don't come up with something entirely new, but we evolved the data model and the operational aspects from version 3 to enable that kind of commonality and flexibility. And that new model enables different levels of abstraction in between control and data plane, and enables a great level of implementation and how you actually deploy it. Next slide. So this is in brief from last IETF meeting per version 3, where we supported two modes, in particular one suitable for a deployment where in between data plane and control plane there is a network controller which can support some level of abstraction. So not everything from the data plane configuration needs to be exposed to the control plane. Another mode was about the direct deployment. So the mobility control plane had direct access to a particular physical data plane node. So there are differences in how the semantics can apply in between these two functional elements. So per mode 1 operation, we had a model which was in a simplified way describing a rule. So the control plane simply pushed the rule down to the data plane or to the network controller, which says, I want you to configure that kind of setup, which says traffic descriptors should be treated as per one or multiple properties. So properties were treatment actions like encapsulation, QoS enforcement. So that was a descriptive approach. And the agent function actually was supposed to enforce one or multiple local control messages to set up this kind of configuration. It was simplistic, it was functional, but it lacked some features. So in particular also since mode 2 operation came in, we had different kind of messaging, different semantics. No data model for mode 2 operation. So we saw the need to harmonize the data models and the operation in the view of both modes operation. Next slide. So this is actually what Satoru presented at last IETF meeting, showing in an illustrative way how the version 3 data models, so here mode 1 operation, which works on ports, which is a key for a rule, traffic descriptors and the treatment actions for that traffic by means of properties, and for mode 2, which is somehow binding attributes for a local configuration to context information into a common data model, which has different granularity to be exposed to the control plane. So I leave it up to you to explain the data model then in the next step. So the basic idea is that even topology information can be maintained in a data model and either in a detailed or in an abstract view be exposed to the control plane. There is data structures in that hold detailed configuration on the data plane, so detailed tunnel configuration, detailed QoS configuration, address translation as needed. And other structures which can be bound to that detailed configuration enable some level of abstraction. So if you can have pre-configuration of some settings on the data plane or on the network controller. The control plane can easily refer to such pre-configuration and adjust such configuration as needed for a particular mobile node. So that actually is suitable to support different kinds of modes as we intended to. And I would like to hand over to Lyle to explain a bit more about some examples of the modeling.
Next slide, please. So what we have here is from the version 3 figure 15. We decided to pick on an example. There were a few. We decided to pick on basically kind of an inline example, very similar to mode 2, where we're essentially in one single command sending down from an RPC perspective basically what we need. So here we have the port, the tunnel information QS, and the traffic selector along with the HMP. So all of your mobility information is sent in one command. And based upon the new data model, we're able to do basically several different things. And we'll show you some styles here in the next couple of slides that are based upon RESTconf, the JSON rendering that you would see typically with a Yang model. And show you how we're supporting both kind of the typical older Model 1, where we have some things that could be built on the fly in terms of configuration and reuse it, and the mode 2, where we're very much an inline sort of activity. So next slide, please. So our first example here up on the left with the JSON representation is very much what we see in the older example from version 3. So we did have in version 3 the idea of a context in mode 2, and we had the idea of a port or a rule in mode or model 1. And so what we did was harmonize the idea of ports, rules, and context in here, and I'll explain here a little bit kind of the relationships. But what we have is essentially a context being built in the style of a model 2, along with the HMP data that you saw before, the tunnel information, and QS information. So this is very similar to this design. However, in the new model, it's very RPC based, and none of this information is shareable. And in other words, all the data that we provide here isn't provided in another naming context that can be reused through subsequent commands. But it's essentially what we had in the previous version. So there really is no loss of what we had in that particular mode. In example 2, we have an example of sharing, and this can be done as a single or multiple transactions. So this can be done all at once, so very similar in style to the single RPC call. Or we could actually, it's a list here, so we could actually run the first context and the second context. Here we actually have an example of basically 2 particular bearers being built, if we think in terms of 3GPP, like a default bearer as well as a dedicated bearer. And so the new concept that we have with respect to context is the idea of basically hierarchy. And what you see is the reference being the parent context in context 2. So from a context 1 perspective, it's very similar to what we have in example 1 with this data being set up. We call out a few other things, typically like base charging information, any other charging information that's specific to that particular context. And then when we look at the relationship in context 2 here with the parent context, we are able to actually pull in this case any sort of information that's required for instantiation of the context inside the node from its parent. So in this case, we didn't have to actually specify the base charging information. And you'll notice we didn't worry about an IP address or an HMP in this design. So those essentially are implied and picked up by the agent and provisioned properly into context 2. So there you see the ability for us to have that sort of hierarchical referencing. So, and in this example, right, this is something we couldn't easily do in the old model. We're actually creating 2 particular dedicated bearers or dedicated tunnels in this case, and providing them back to one mobility session. So this is a little bit more exotic example of something that would require at least 2 transactions in the previous model. Next slide, please. So this is actually a much more Model 1 version 3 style. So here we actually peel out only the information that's available to context one, which is the tunnel information, and we make a reference to ports. Now, in the previous model, you would have, as a separate activity, had to actually provision the ports and then provision the context. Here we see the RPC. We can actually handle the idea of actually provisioning the ports. What we're doing is taking the same information that was originally in example one. We're providing more naming context around it so that it can be reused later. So think of it as basically parameter recycling as we move through the operations. So here we actually spell out the ports, and there's a much longer model that's very similar to what we showed a few slides ago, where we have essentially ports and which are now referring to policy groups, individual policies. What we used to call old ports or rules, we now just call them rules. That's what they were before, so we just made it very obvious in the new model. And then we call it out. So we see a lot of that QoS information that was common between these as being here. And then once again, we can create another context. And here in this example, we're just reusing the port IDs. So you see that context over the wire representation becoming much smaller. And so like the previous example, we can do this as one RPC call. Basically in the design, or we can do this as multiple and representing a fact that a context can be built later, but we can reuse information that was sent in subsequent RPCs. So we've actually implemented at Sprints a version 3 Model 1 system. And what I can tell you is this is far more efficient in terms of design than what we currently have in terms of the number of northbound of client to agent activities, far more efficient. So once again, these are examples based upon the JSON rendering. If we were to say use RESTconf, and they're not representative of the final Yang model, but I think you get an idea. So just to kind of summarize here, right, we have much more flexibility. You can still be very much the old single RPC mode 2. You can very much inline accommodate multiple mode or model 1 operations from version 3 all in one shot, and it's one converged model. So next slide. So conceptually, we've changed quite a few things, and the naming conventions have changed. Probably the biggest change here is ports. We now call them rules. They were rules in the first place, but we do have the ability now to just call them what they are. I think that's also good for control plane implementers who are receiving rules from a diameter perspective. It's very obvious then how that translates into FPC. Properties. We had two kinds of properties in version 3. We had those that were directly related to treatment action. They're now a part of the rules. So once again, trying to get back to that obviousness piece for designers so that they can look at a property and actually very easily realize where it belongs inside the model. And so we've separated those out as actions, basically treatment actions under the rules. And some properties we were using for administrative or context, and so you'll see them move higher up in the model and kind of stay there. And then we're looking at reconciling those with some of the ephemeral state and some of the other states, because a lot of those properties were more related to being able to hold on to much longer transactions where we only had partial information in the control plane. Descriptors actually had two names inside Model 3. So when we actually push them over in the config tree in Model 1, in version 3, excuse me, when we push them over the config tree, we called them descriptors. When we actually instantiated them, we called them forwarding rules. They're now just called descriptors. So that was something that was very confusing for us developing because it was the same data structure, but a completely different name. So sometimes it seemed quite maddening to actually deal with this. But we've cleaned that up. We've cleaned that up as well. You're going to find them in one place in the model. You're going to know where they're at. When we say a descriptor, we say an action, you know where to go. So definitely a large cleanup there. We have several new concepts, as we've talked about. So hierarchy. And with that hierarchy establishment, you have several options here, and along with what we showed in a couple of examples, basically inheriting properties. We also have fate sharing. So if you can actually remove the roots of the hierarchy, everything else goes. This actually optimizes the delete model. And in version 3 Model 2, what we did was we kind of had a context that could span multiple commands. This really takes care of that and allows us to have context and subcontext naturally. This also cleans up the amount of data that we have to repeat. We're really in the model at this point If you're repeating data, it's because either you didn't understand that you had an opportunity to collapse the data, or you're repeating it intentionally for some other purpose. It's not something by accident. Ports were formerly a couple of different types, but ports in this model equate to virtual rules or virtually instantiated rules in the old model. And we actually call them out. Really, port was so overloaded and had so many concepts in the old model, it was just kind of tough to figure out what kind of port you were dealing with. We do have structures used for policy grouping that are available for us now. These are convenience layers that allow us to basically consolidate and collapse and get to a much more concise over-the-wire representation. And with that, really, that's policy groups, policies, which do apply order, and then the rules themselves, descriptors and actions. So once again, when you're looking for a particular data structure in the new model, it's in one location, it hasn't been renamed. It should, we believe, pass the obviousness test of where data goes. Anyway, I think next slide. I think we'll hand back to Marco, or we'll just go through this. As far as next steps of what we're thinking about, so we're actually going to sit down. We have the concepts in. I think generally myself and my co-authors are generally happy with the progress we've made in the convergence. I don't know that we came in thinking that everything was possible in terms of converging the models. And after this week, I think we're quite confident that what was proposed is definitely a good way to go. So we have a lot of work ahead of us. So we're going to actually finish the descriptions, the high-level ideas, as well as the operational aspects, getting that over-the-wire representation. We'll then go ahead and define the actual Yang models and the RPCs and kind of get that out to make sure that we have the proof, if you will, of the consolidation and the optimization of the over-the-wire representation. And once we have that, we'll really start, the revision 4 work really begins. So we'll go ahead and actually put those models into Rev 4, update the text, and try and get that out. Our planning, even though some folks may be going on vacation and stuff, no excuse for us. So we plan to have an update out and get feedback in the September timeframe. So with that, I don't know if there's any questions.
Is there any security mechanism to protect the messages?
Not at this point, right? We are defining a Yang model, and essentially the overall interface operations. And I think in this particular document, what's going to be interesting is I think we may stop there, and then there may be subsequent work required for how it may be rendered over the wire. Because if we go back to like a mode 1 versus a mode 2, in a mode 1, where we may have something like a SDN controller, then we're really looking at the northbound interface technology for the SDN controller for security in some respects. In mode 2, where it would be it was still the same Yang RPC, but rendered over a specific over-the-wire format, that would probably require another draft. And there we would probably see the over-the-wire security semantics built in. At this point, we haven't contemplated anything specifically in the RPC because we are really talking about the conceptual operations of forwarding at this time. But
okay, couple of questions from my side. So once you get the 04 out, do you envision that version would be then ready for the kind of for last call?
I believe so. I don't think any of us, I'm looking at my co-authors, I don't think any of us would have any objection. I think version 4 should be good enough for last call.
Okay, good. So, and did I hear correctly that this stuff is not anymore any theoretical, but there's an implementation based on the model that you have?
Yes. So at Sprint, we have an implementation with some of our research. And so a lot of our feedback, and I thank my co-authors for bearing with me, because I know my feedback can be quite extensive. But a lot of our feedback is based upon what we've discovered as we've been implementing.
Okay, great.
Krishnan. So I had a comment. So if you have an implementation, it's like really good to document it somewhere. So if you look at like RFC 6982, it talks about how to write like an implementation status section. So what you do is like just go in there, put in some information about what you actually implemented and what you didn't. Really, okay. Right? Like, so I know it's not going to be complete, like thing of this, but that would be really good, and it really helps when we go to the ESG if we actually see that section in there. It's not going to be published with the RFC. Okay. So that's the way it's designed, so that it goes with the draft until it actually gets published. Oh, okay. Thank you. So, and if other people have implementations, they can also put it into the same section if you want to do that. All right. Oh, thank you for the information. Yeah. And the other thing, one more thing I want to talk about is like there's some stuff happening in Yang right now about like operational state, like how you figure that stuff out. So I think it's something you need to keep an eye on at this point. I don't know if you know there's like a draft in NetMod, like and it's like this huge discussion. So probably that's something you want to keep an eye out for. If you don't know the name of the draft, I can probably send an email to you to. Well, we've been looking, and that was actually a big point of discussion this week because we had created some of our own operational state parameters in version 3. Okay. And I think, and please do send us the information because there's only a few drafts out, right? So we may miss a few. But right now we've really taken a step back from the operational side in hopes that there's a good solid solution here. Okay. Coming from NetMod. Okay. I think we have so much other work to do. Okay. That we'll probably try to, always adopt as much as we can, write as little new Yang as possible. Okay, I'll send out a note to the list and then. Thank you. Okay. Thanks.
This is Alex Petrescu. So I had young models are more and more important throughout IETF. Before there were young models, we configured protocols using MIB. Yes. And I noticed PBU and PBA on the slide. Yes. So I would like to ask whether there is any relationship between the young model that you develop and the proxy mobile IP v6 MIB, or it's two different. I don't, Shri, if you want to.
I think the FPC interface, Shri Gandavalli, sorry. Yeah. See, the FPC interface is between a control plane node and a data plane node, whereas the mobility signaling is between mobility entities. So those are two different interfaces. So we are not replacing a PMIB protocol with a Yang model.
So you basically only had this one as for example, yeah, to kind of boil it into some concrete.
In fact, if you want to go back to the slide, please. Right. So here, right. So we see the control plane, the LMAC, and then we envision somewhere within that LMAC is the FPC client. So here we would expect, right, business as usual. But as you can see, right, there, at this point in this boundary, we've really left the control signaling side of the world, the standard PMIP, and we're now into that separation piece. So they do obviously share the same data concepts and ideas in terms of life cycle for the session because it's directly stimulated by the PBU and obviously the PBA. But we're really working on fundamentally, a slightly, inside or in the box sort of messaging here. Any other questions?
All right, thank you. Good work, and the waiting for the update, not holding my breath for it, but the you have some history. Wow. Yeah, with everyone. Yeah. Wow. Anyway, I'm excited for the waiting for the 04. We kind of get this work completed and then move to the next step of the work.
All right. Well, and we can talk about history tomorrow.
Yeah.
In time.
Oh, don't get me started. Okay, thank you. Yeah, there's a certain working groups where it belongs to a tradition that nothing happens in first 3 years. Yeah. All right, the next thing on the agenda is the on-demand mobility. So, Danny.
Okay.
The magic wand is there if you need. So it doesn't progress the slides, but you can pinpoint people in the audience.
That's the red thing?
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to provide a brief update about on-demand in total, not a specific document, because there are a couple of there's a couple of topics that are related to on-demand. So just to give a context. So next slide, please. So it's actually, this is the work that I managed to collect, which is related to on-demand. There's the on-demand mobility management draft, which I understand is work group last call had completed this week. After some intensive work in the past couple of weeks. Then there is work showing various use cases which are related to the various types of IP address provisioning and checking whether there are some gaps and whether additional flags or parameters are required. And this is led by Sale, and he will present that. There's a new draft. It won't be presented this face-to-face, but I'm sure you're going to present that in the next one, right? Third is the DHCP extensions to support the conveying of the type of address the mobile node requires and what the network had provided. It has been an individual draft for quite some time. I got some useful comments in the previous IETF. I read RFC 7227 and have made changes to the proxy, to the prefix, but I didn't publish that yet because you asked to be over the on-demand draft before we continue with DHCP. So now I can continue with that. I must say, Suresh, actually, originally I copied the format from RFC 3633 because I didn't want to invent a new format, and that misled me. And I was a little surprised that there is no update to RFC 3633, so that at least, I mean, what will happen right now is DHCP servers will have to support two formats for prefixes, and that's not good.
Okay, Suresh Krishnan. So RFC 3633 is not going to be updated, it's going to be gone. Okay, so RFC 3315, which is the base DHCP v6, is getting updated, and it's actually folding in a bunch of stuff.
Okay.
Okay. So if you look at like the 3315 BIS draft, you will see what's going to be there. So like if you take a look at it when you get a chance and see if you if you think something is missing, that's the place to do it. Okay, it's in working group last call.
Okay.
Now.
Okay.
So do it in the next week or so. Okay.
Okay. I'm not an expert in DHCP.
Doesn't matter. So the option format should be in, I think, 70 to 27.
Yeah,
right?
I saw that.
Right. Okay. So that should be the advice for all DHCP options going forward. Okay, so if you think there's something in, I don't see it, but if you see something in 3315 BIS that is not obeying the formats in there, then it's something that needs to come up. Or send me a note, I can take a look and do something. But yeah, so 3315 BIS is the place for like the actual use. Just 70 to 27 is for options.
And
so
3633 will be,
it'll be obsoleted by the 3315 BIS when it gets approved.
Okay. Okay. So I will release a new version after this face-to-face. Another another topic that I think Alex has pointed out in the list is the need for stateless IP address support for on-demand. And I didn't do any work on that yet. I think you did.
So yeah, we have a bunch of those. And those just need to be kind of refreshed.
You had a container, a draft with a container. Was it an extension to
yes? So
advertisement?
Yeah. So there's been a couple of works around earlier. So there's one that has been kind of described in this working group, which basically adds the kind of coloring to the prefixes. Then there was a related work that we hope to kind of adopt and kind of build on. That was the work that we were doing in MIF. So you had the provisioning domains that you could actually encapsulate this kind of information about the where you could put the context around the IP addresses or prefixes that you are advertising in your router advertisements. So yeah, there is existing work on this area. So we kind of.
But MIF now is in a.
Yeah. But so there's a couple of ways around it. So we will discuss that at the end of the meeting. But the one thing is that the ADs or the AD Terry, who was responsible for MIF, said that he can AD sponsor stuff. That's one way. Or then we just like take what we had. We had pretty well thought to extend solution already. We can bring them here and kind of try to bring them through this working group and complete that work what we started. So we did have a working group drafts already on this topic.
Right.
Yeah. So I don't kind of see or be willing kind of starting from scratch.
Exactly. So I'm willing to help if
yes.
you want to bring it to the working group and you need help, at least to add the on-demand stuff.
Yeah. So yeah, that was the kind of long-term plan. It has been a longer-term plan than anyone planned. So.
So on that, can we bring them here, Yoni, instead of AD sponsor, because that way we can ensure everything is tied properly? Because quite a bit of work already happened.
Yeah, so Krishnan, so there's a couple of issues in there. So first thing is the review stuff, right? So so that's like kind of like a fundamental document, and we still have to figure out how to get review on that thing, right? And so DMM could
on
be
which
a place.
document are you talking? Not the multiple interfaces, the specific routing address.
Yeah. Right. Okay. So, so another proposal that has been floated last night, like when Yoni and I went for dinner, like people are talking about it, like not me and not him, but is that HomeNet would be another place which has the same issue because they need these things too. So I think it's something that needs to get worked out, but that draft is almost complete. Like when MIP first closed down, right? Like the draft is ready to go. It's just that we need to figure out the logistics on how to do it, right? And get the review. So the review part is what lacked in MIF, and unless like we got like 4 people like raising the hand right now, it doesn't make sense to bring it here. Like it's like just as bad as AD sponsoring. Okay, so okay, go ahead.
So how can we progress? Because we want to. I mean, at least from the small on-demand point of view, we need to add this support to that draft. Should we do it here? Should we wait for MIF? What should we do?
Yes, so it gives completion. I think I think HomeNet is dealing with many other things. I'm really worried if you take it there, it will completely go on a tangent.
Alex Petrescu. I'm not sure whether it is really easy to consider the earlier Juni's work as ready to be submitted to IESG, because since then the on-demand mobility, even the terminology has evolved.
Right. I didn't mean submit to IESG. I wanted to go through on it and see what we need to add in order to support on demand and then do that. But I didn't want to start work from scratch. I mean, it does make sense. Okay,
Okay.
So actually we're working.
So we need to remember one thing. So the work that was done in MIF was kind of building the framework, and it was realized long ago that when you want to do something mobility specific, you need to extend it. So you need to actually define the stuff that goes inside the framework. So the framework is the thing that is kind of, because it brings the security, it brings the kind of the overall rules and stuff like that. But if you want then the kind of actual coloring part of the prefixes or some other semantics, you need to define the option in the respective group that needs that kind of functionality, and that would be here.
Okay, so what you're saying is you prefer not to touch that draft, but to finalize it and to write a new one that extends that draft for the specific coloring that we're talking about, the address type.
So,
right?
So if I take a shot at Diony, right? Like, so that draft is like necessary but not sufficient stuff for your things to work. Okay.
Right.
So and it's very defined at a very kind of abstract level, like what the PVD is. So so how do you associate some mobility kind of meaning to PVD needs to get done here, not somewhere else?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yes,
so like,
but I will need to reference an RFC, and it's not.
You don't need to reference an RFC. You can reference a draft. That's still an active draft.
Yeah.
The other MIF draft is not expired. It's like still active draft. The working group is dead, right? But the draft is still alive. So reference the draft and let's figure out how that draft ends up, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So, but it doesn't. You don't need to refer to an RFC. Referring to a draft is perfectly fine.
I will reference a draft. If it becomes an RFC, I will have to change the reference.
Correct.
And it has to. So the new draft cannot complete before.
Correct.
Okay,
Correct.
but you're saying
at some point, like this draft can progress all the way until you get an RFC number, and the RFC editor queue will be held. There's like a star misref state. That's where it's going to be held. Like it's waiting for reference to get through. That's it. Okay. So and then we have to figure something out.
So just okay. So once we got stuck on the first slide of this presentation and stuff, but
I won't continue. I'm talking over the other slides are
okay. So
saying so we don't.
The good thing about the design that we did so. In a MIF for this framework is the thing that what it actually encapsulates are array options. So if you design an router advertisement option, you can kind of prototype without the framework because it's basically is a valid option. But at the end, you will encapsulate that inside the container that was defined in MIF, so to get the kind of PVD semantics and stuff like that. So you can start kind of thinking about how the mobility specific option would look like, and the things that you would need, and even write code around it. But
Okay. So the last topic I have is the link state change exposure. This was something that I presented, I think, in Prague, and that is exposing link state events to the application through a socket interface or through some extensions. I was planning to continue working on that. There are various issues regarding this. Including is it a good thing to expose these things to application level or not?
So I think there's existing previous work. So the DNA working group long ago had to talk RFC on this.
There was an RFC that was written by Alper, but that was exposing data link events to the stack, not to the application. I don't want to start a long discussion around that, but I'm planning to present that again in the next IETF, and I will also expose the various problems or questions for the group to evaluate. And if the group says don't work on it, or continue working and we would like to help, any feedback like that will be great.
Okay, Suresh Krishnan. So yeah, as a co-author on that RFC, that's 4957 that you're talking about, right? Like
the one with Alpha, the one that exposed data link events to the
correct,
stack, right?
and that's really old. It could probably use an update. Like we were working with GPRS and stuff, so it's like very old, right? Like
Right.
so, and Ethernet bridge changes and stuff. But yeah, so. So that DNS stuff was done to provide input to the IP interface, right? So
Right.
to figure out like when to do the DNA procedures when an interface gets initialized. So if you want to do something on top of it, you should probably look at IP DNA stuff, which is like, I think 6059, like where it tells you, you're trying to figure out if your link attachment changed. So not look at the link layer events themselves, right? So the chain is going to be your link layer says something is changed. Then you start IP connectivity chain checks. Okay, so that's like it's done by doing like a RSRA probe or a NSNA probe or a DHCPV6 confirm probe, something like that, right? Use like the IP layer probe to figure out if you want to do something more.
Okay, but this is all probes that are being done by various components in the stack itself.
Correct.
And we're talking about, hey, does the application need the application that opened the socket, does it need to know about that? For example, for things that are being done through SIP. SIP has the ability to detect disconnections and overcome those disconnections by reopening sockets or new negotiations. Is this interesting? Do we want to be able to trigger SIP and say, hey, this happened. This is the time to try and there are more subtle issues, which I'm trying not to get into right now. I'll show that in the presentation, and then we can decide whether we want to continue that.
So there's a couple of schools of thought. Okay, so there was this MIF connection manager school of thought. Like I think Dapeng was involved in it, which says like hide this below the application. Okay, that's one school of thought.
That's exactly one of the debates. Do we want to hide it or not? And
right. And the other school of thought, which is like the some stuff that like I wrote, it's like a document. I think Dapeng was involved in that one too. Is that it's some kind of guidelines for applications, right? Which says like, okay, if you have multiple address possibilities or interfaces, like try to use all of them. Okay, whenever connectivity keeps going up and down, like make sure that like you use the like working set of locators, right? So don't think of it in the classic mobility sense because it's also multi-homing stuff. So like we need to be careful because it's very hard to get that kind of recommendation right. Okay, so and first problem, right? Second problem is people have gone ahead and done whatever the hell they want, right? Like so if you look at like Microsoft, like if you look at like Metro Application Guide, they've done something like this, whatever is in this draft, like it's a personal draft. I think it's like draft deng MIF application guidelines or something, where we say like these set of things, but they've already been implemented now, right? Like even though it's not even a working group draft anywhere, it's in Windows Phone, like Android has something very similar to that. So like the OS stack vendors have gone ahead, they've done whatever they wanted. Like so best you can do is like probably try to document these efforts because I don't think we are at this point where we can provide like new guidance for this. That's my feeling. No head, okay. No AD hat.
Okay, so let's discuss that next time. I'll try and bring all these points, and we can decide whether we want this work or not. Yes, Charlie.
Charlie Perkins. Very short. There's also, I think, RFC 4907. That's architectural implications of link indicators, which I recently was made aware of again. So take a look at that too.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, you're done.
Yeah.
Okay, so. The thing about the 07 version of the actual on-demand draft, so it got reviews and those have been addressed, and those who actually gave the reviews have acknowledged that they are happy with the changes. I went through the draft, so to me, I'm not going to run a new working group Haskell on that stuff, so I'm just going to move the document into the further in the process. So we for now, from your point of view, you are done. So that will happen after this meeting. So thanks.
Thank you, and thank you for the help from the group.
All right, so the next one is the distributed mobility anchoring. So Anthony.
I'm going to go through the update as I explained it. Last time there were two comments, so I'm going to address those two comments. One comment was to align it with the draft of the work team, the fourth work team, and the other comment is to explain the solution more clearly. So we did this update. The update includes some of the changes, but there's not really a lot of changes, but rather more on clarifying how the solution works. So basically, this draft is on distributed anchoring, so it explains what the distributed anchoring needs to do. And in particular, a lot of these functions already exist, so we'll emphasize on the new functions later, okay, in the example. So in the next slide, we are going to give some examples. What we find in this baseline solution is that given the capability of the anchor being distributed, we are able to do the solution, the mobility solution. And in this case, we do not need to add new changes to the standard. Not because we don't need it, but the changes are already made by other drafts, such as the on-demand mobility. They're two different addresses, so they're already there. So we just reference to other drafts and what are the changes are. Therefore, this will become just an informational draft to give the baseline for the solution. And the solution will have two cases. One case is that if you don't need to change the IP address, and the other case is when you need to change IP address, just the two cases only. And when you keep the IP address, we also elaborate into cases where you have a centralized control plane, and when you have a hierarchical network, and so on, other examples. So those are the examples. So in the next slide, we go through the two. Okay, these are the changes that we have made. We reference to architecture draft. In fact, it had already referenced to many other drafts, such as the signaling, the on-demand mobility, or the draft, they're already there because the architecture draft was new, so it referenced to that. And then as for the solution, we basically do a cleanup in this draft, very careful and try to explain things more clearly and correct any mistakes that are there. And then I'm going to go for the two solutions again in the next slide. So that's the first case is that when you don't need to make any, when you don't need the section continuity, so you just, let me see, when we go for this draft, the only solution we need to concentrate is to take advantage that you have multiple anchors. If you keep your own anchor, then there's nothing new. What the centralized mobility is already doing the job. So we only look at the case in which you have multiple anchors. How do we take advantage of it? And there's one case is that we move the IP address of the new anchor. The other case is to move to the new anchor, but use the old IP address. So the first case is that we just use the new IP address of the new anchor. And that's very straightforward. Basically, the section will close and then you open. And then we go through in the next slide, we go through the workflow. Wait a minute, the architecture already is taking the centralized control plane and distributed plane, which is consistent with the architecture chart and the solution. So in this case, we first have a in the first anchor, we had allocated address, we have the flow, and then when we move to the new anchor, it closes the flow and then allocate a new IP address. Now that allocation of IP address will be needed even when you keep the old anchor. There's something new as we'll see later. Okay. So whether you need to use the new IP address or whether you use the old IP address because of the capability of the new anchor. So this IP address will be allocated again, even in the next case. So in this case, it's straightforward because you're in a new anchor, so you use the IP address. Okay. But then when we go to the next slide, that's the case where we need the session continuity. So the new anchor is going to have the IP1 as well as IP2. That's the basic difference for distributed mobility. If it's centralized mobility, you might have only keep the IP1 only. But because you have other section, if a new section is able to use the new IP address, therefore it's going to, the new anchor will be in charge of both IP1 and IP2. Okay, that's one of nature. But it doesn't need new change in the standard because they are already there. The work team one had already worked that out. So we go for the workflow in the next slide again. So in addition to the new prefix, which is allocated, it has to keep the old prefix. So we will request the old prefix, and it does so the first anchor will release the prefix, so this is basically a prefix delegation from anchor 1 to anchor 2. It's the basic prefix delegation, and there are different ways to do the prefix delegation. You can just do the command from anchor 1 to anchor 2, or you use a DHCP server. And in this case, we just take, this is just an example. We use a DHCP server. So the first anchor releases the prefix, and then the new anchor requests the prefix, and then the anchor reply, you get the prefix. It will do the route advertisement of the new prefix. So it configured with the new IP address. So it can continue with the flow that it had from before for the session continuity. And when the section terminates, there's no need to use for the new anchor to take care of the old IP address. So we just let the DHCP prefix delegation to time out because the prefix delegation has a time. So it just time out. Okay. Now there are other details you can add to it. For example, if the section hasn't finished, what are you going to do? Then you will probably need to renew the prefix delegation, and then you have to keep continuing the prefix. But if suppose that the section has finished already, then you will just wait for the prefix delegation to time out. When it times out, then the prefix delegation will time out, so the prefix will move back to the previous network. So you don't have to take care of all these new prefixes for the new prefix. To make the routing simpler. And then when you need to start the new prefix. Now notice that we have also dedicated the new prefix to there. So if there's a new flow, it would, in the bottom of the slide, it would just use the new prefix without complicating the mobility solution. So this is some sort of like a baseline solution. Basically, we find that when you have distributed anchor, we are able to do the anchoring. And the solution is based, the other detail was just, for example, it could be hierarchical network or other thing we can add to it later. But we just keep this as a base solution, as an informational jar, using the function, the addition that are already made by other group, other team, and then build a solution for that. Okay, so we have worked on it for, the team had already worked it for a long time, so we would like to get some feedback from the group again. Are there any questions?
Shri Gundavali, can you make sure the terminology you cross-reference to WT4 work item?
Yes.
I didn't see any of the terms consistency, but you may want to check again.
It is in the, did you read version A?
Sorry?
Did you read version A?
Version 8, probably versions. Yeah, I
Yeah,
don't
so,
recall.
so the latest one tries to align with your stuff.
Then I take that back. Okay.
Version 7 was written before, before you.
I don't know. I checked which one. I don't remember, but I'll check again. Okay, thanks.
Okay. It refers to that draft and then put down it has the new name home DPA home and then it says in this draft we just abbreviate to DPA and so on.
I think all the other 4 WT items, work team items, if you use consistent terminology, then everything will be good. So just don't define new terms. Yeah, just
home and access. But then they put in parentheses because there are so many figures.
No. My point is,
room, so I just put down parentheses. We abbreviate.
Sure. If you want us to abbreviate something, let's do that there, and let's use one consistent terminology. That's all. Already, there are too many terms. My point is, let's not make it any more confusing. That's all. Whatever you can do. Yeah.
Okay.
Alex Petrescu. This is a comment on the protocol diagram that you have shown, the message exchanges. It looks very promising to my opinion, and I would like to point a little issue that could be a relationship with the DHC working group. Do you know the DHC working group? DHC, the ones that develop
DHCP working group.
DHCP.
Okay. So there is you have there a operation called forwarding table update.
Yes.
You see this text?
Yes.
Now in DHC working group, there is a similar problem that is happening with the DHCP relay.
Yes.
And currently there is discussion in that working group about this forwarding table update.
Okay.
And it would be meaningful to relate somehow what we do here, what DHC may do in the future or may not do at all or something. But this shows the relevance of this work. I mean, it is relevant that you describe it here and that other people talk about the same problem.
Okay.
That makes it a problem that may need to be addressed and solved somehow. Okay.
Okay. It just called the forwarding update here for simplicity.
Yes.
What is behind it is basically because the working for is basically emphasizing on the centralized control plane and distributed data plane, and then the other team had built in all those signals.
Okay.
So that's why we didn't describe how to do it. We think that probably macro sim or whatever with the control plane talking to the data plane, whatever signal they had, we would use it. That's why I didn't elaborate. But if the DHCP had something, I'll look at that also.
Yes, they have the same problem, I think, but they don't talk forwarding data plane or something. But I think they may have the same problem.
Are they also separate control plane and data plane?
No, I don't think.
Oh, then that would be more complicated. Yeah. Yeah. That's not easy if you don't have a common control plane.
Well, control plane, data plane is a tool.
Yes.
Not everybody uses the same tool.
Okay.
But the problem is there independently of the tool.
A long time ago, we gave an example of using BGP, but BGP is a controversial issue. That's why we removed that in this draft.
Okay, I understand. Okay.
Suresh Krishnan, so also the AD for DHC. So Alex, like you're right, but it's not the same place. Okay, so there is like a routing update mechanism that's thought of, but it's not relevant to this case because it's coming from a different place. Okay, so it's not in the same location in the picture. It should be in the DHCP server picture. So there's like a DR and RR. That's like Ian is in the room, so like Ian can probably, if he was not checking his email, he can probably. So Ian, he was talking about the stuff where, like you were talking about the DHCP relay and the routing delegating because of that, right? Like, so I think that's what he's referring to. So I don't think it's relevant here personally, Alex, but Ian, he's talking about the forwarding table update line in there. So I think it's not the same thing, but yeah, if you or Alex have different opinions, we can talk about it.
I don't know whether there is time now to talk about or not, but yeah, I would like no. Okay, so indeed the operation that DHC working group talks about is happening mainly in the AR access router. If the AR is a relay, that's the problem the DHC working group has. Here we talk about forwarding table update in the AR and also in the DHCP servers and all the intermediate routers. That is the point Suresh is making. But at the same time, it's operation called forwarding table update. So it's the same operation, the same problem from my perspective. Maybe it doesn't have this scaling issue. The DHC problem does not have this scaling issue that the DMM has, but it's still, there is a need to update the forwarding table in DMM and also in DHC. So this is my response to.
Yes.
Okay. And I would like to discuss this further. Actually, I already started discussing it with Francis Dupont. I don't know if you know Francis Dupont. And we look from some vendor, equipment vendor that may have interest in this and to try to build up support, maybe write some new internet draft about this.
Thank you.
In Farah. So yeah, we've got a similar set of message flows here, and I mean, looking at this, I don't have any particular depth with it, but it looks like a similar problem to what we've been talking about. What I'm not entirely sure, I mean, I'm not familiar with the specific functionality of the devices that we're talking about as the ARs in this case. I think there's something to talk about though. Yeah, as a result of yesterday's DHCP meeting, it looks like there's some, well, we need to write something up or dig out an old document that may describe this stuff. So it may be a topic that's coming back to life in DHC anyway. So it would be worth following the work in there, and I'd be happy to talk to you about it afterwards.
Okay, so we will reference to, so you are writing a draft already, right?
Well, we heard yesterday in DHC that there may already be an older draft that covers this kind of thing. So that was going to be my first thing, was to review that and see whether the text in there is good, whether that's something that we could bring back to life.
Yeah. Well, right now what the draft is put down is that an example could be BGP update, but that is controversial. So if you have a separate control data plan, you can do that faster and more scalable. That's in the existing text. And if there's something better, we can certainly improve that.
I mean, in terms of scoping it as a DHCP problem, then it will be the specification of the relay behavior in terms of what that needs to do. When it comes to things like how do you advertise this to the rest of the network, I suspect that within the scope of a DHC document, it's going to be fairly loose in terms of saying this action needs to happen. There are a number of ways you could do it. The rest is down to you.
Yeah. If you use the control plan to a data plan, and you could use some other protocol that could be outside, like 1.4 or something. That's why I didn't describe it here.
Yeah, I mean that is a functional operation that needs to happen as part of this process to make it work. But it's really an implementation kind of a deployment question as to, do you do this through static routes? Do you do that summarize everything? Do you do it through BGP or another IGP, whatever that happens to be?
So maybe we change the text to that this is an implementation choice and different choices, something like that.
I haven't read the draft, so I can't comment on the text.
But what I would say that now you know the suspects.
Yes.
So it's up to you now, to dig out what is the issue, whether it actually affects this document, something to care about or not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, as I say, it's a topic that's we're planning on looking at in DHC. So if you follow the work there, and that'll give you a better idea of the way the DHC working group sees this problem, and you can see if it's relevant from that.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anthony, yeah, I have comments. So in your solution, I think that is the example of the solutions.
Yeah.
Did you use the forwarding path signaling management? That
can you repeat
Yeah,
the question again?
do you consider to use the FPS message that we just discussed?
Yeah, that's basically they will probably do the forwarding table update and also move the context. Those things would move over there. That's why the job basically reference to other job for the complete solution for all the details. Yeah.
Are we done with the presentation? Or?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'll send some comments.
Okay, good. All right, let's move. Thank you, Anthony. We will do the adoption goal later on. So let's move on. So now we are for the into the MIP maintenance track. So Charlie, quick update.
Well, this is a very short presentation, probably too short, and it's all the way from the very abstract to the extremely concrete. Basically, there's in draft RFC 4283 that specifies a couple of ways to identify mobile nodes, particular network address identifier, NAI, and so on. And since that time, there's been a lot of suggestions about how we need to actually be able to use other kinds of identifiers. And so this document specifies a number of other kinds of, essentially tabulates another set of other kinds of identifiers, and just specifies how they fit in the same extension. So basically the draft was done quite some months ago, and then got to comment that there really wasn't enough information there to understand about how the identifiers were to be used in the extension. And there's a bit of a balancing act, because on the one hand, this is not intended to be the normative specification for the format of those identifiers. On the other hand, we want this extension to be useful and for people to understand how to use the identifiers. So as a compromise, there was a lot of text inserted into the documents, probably twice as long as it was before, but the other text is purely descriptive and just goes through each one of the various kinds of mobile node identifiers to give an idea about what it is, why you might want to use it, and a few hints about the format. So the new kinds of mobile node identifiers are either RFID sorts of identifiers, or IEEE EUI 64 addresses, for instance, MAC addresses. We allow IPv6 addresses to be identifier. The DHCP has a set of 4 kinds of DUIDs that can be used as identifiers. And finally, 3GPP has, for instance, the MZ that can be used as identifier. So that, I think, and it's a relatively simple idea, a relatively short draft, and I think we've addressed all the comments. Of course, I'd be delighted to get more comments from anybody that would read the draft. Other than that, I think it's probably done.
Yep. Thank you, Charlie. So it was Sri and me who were guilty for this request for this excess text. So basically, if you are happy, I am happy, and then the working group is happy.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I created quite a bit of work for this, but that was the reason was, if we leave it so vague, I thought, vendors won't be able to implement it. That was my concern. But again, I really appreciate you putting, I created a lot of work for you. Thank you so much. And I think I browsed the document. I think it's in a good shape, but I just want to just if everybody can review it, that's good. But I think it's ready to move on to IES.
I don't mind if you create work for me, full employment.
Yeah.
Thank
Okay.
you, Chair.
So the plan is that I move this document forward and we're done.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. So this is the end of the kind of exciting presentations for today. And the the next thing what we have on the agenda, so Dabeng and I were discussing that we need to kind of, and we got some requests that we have 2 documents here that would deserve to be part of the working group items. Also kind of get the complete our milestones. So so we have 2 documents now on table. So the what the working team was working on the deployment models, that draft was published like months ago. So I hope that people have read it. There's some good work put into it, and the now the editor is willing to kind of give up his rights for the mastering the document for the working group. And then the other one is the Ansonix work that has really been around for a couple of years now. So I think that it's time to kind of to get that also into the working group and let the finish the stuff and move on that work. So let's start with the older work. So the draft CHAN DMM, this will probably anchoring. So I will do the kind of adoption calls. All these will be, of course, ratified in the mailing list, but the just doing the normal poll. So who has read some version, hopefully the latest version of the distributed mobility anchoring draft? Please raise your hand. Okay, we got about 10 hands. Then the who thinks this document is ready to be adopted to a working group? Please raise your hand. 5, 6, okay. And who thinks the opposite? Or meaning that this document should not be adopted as a working group item? And if you raise your hand, you need to state the reason why. I see 0 hands. Okay, that's a good indication. So we'll run this poll through again on the mailing list after the meeting, and get the second last milestone added to the completed. Okay, then for the other draft, I might actually want to pull it up.
Maybe this should have been a follow-up of, we should have had maybe a presentation to just remind everyone. So we should have had a presentation probably on this one. Yeah.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
Yes. But anyway, so the thing is that that this topic has been on the our charter for a long time. This one?
Yeah.
It's my Apple that is causing problems. Okay. So this is the document that we are talking about. It's going to be informational document, not that long, describing the deployment models that we have seen this stuff being talked about for a long time around the FSM concept, right?
Right. So we give at least like 3 or 4 presentations on this. That's one thing.
Yeah.
And the authors, we have to add it, like there are a bunch of contributors to the document. Some of them will get moved as the authors, primary authors.
Yeah. So this is the kind of basis of the work that the what we heard the first presentation today. So all this terminology and all these cases, how it works, is actually based on this model that is described here. So it would be kind of logical move also to adopt that, so that the CPDP work actually would make more sense when we have the actual model that is starting to apply to. So asking the same questions, who has read this document? Okay. Maybe I should also raise my hand. Okay. And then the other question, who thinks this document should be adopted as a working group item? Raise your hand, please. Yeah, 6, 7. Who thinks the opposite? Please raise your hand. Okay, this is like asking for a note taker. Okay. All right. Yeah, you get the same response. All right. Looks like there's a just because that we didn't have the presentation. I just want to make sure that no one feels offended. So the purpose of the meetings is not to show PowerPoints. We can also do stuff without having the PowerPoint stuff. So just who is willing to kind of contribute to this work also? I mean the deployment models, like reviewing and the giving comments. All right, good. Thank you.
You got the names?
Yeah, I know. I could pretty much predict who is showing their hands. Yeah, I know.
For the note taker, it's Charlie, Anthony, Alex, Marco, Danny, Carlos,
yeah.
And three other.
Yeah. All right, thank you. So we will run the same thing through the mailing list. So if someone wasn't here present, they can voice their concerns and stuff like that. But the indication was pretty strong. Okay. Then moving on. So I will show my magnificent chair slide. All right, so after these 2 adoptions, we have pretty much nailed down the milestones that we had. It is awesome. And a lot of this work is like a process work for chairs to make sure, and the AD to review them in an expedited manner, and the ISG doing the fine job and so on. So that brings us to a question, what next? So we have some time now, like a bit too much time actually, but we are going to go through this one. Yep, Charlie.
Well, I wanted to ask something that's slightly irrelevant, or not according to this, but and I should have said it before, but I'm gotten behind on reading the forwarding plane control plane document, FPC, and I was a little bit surprised at how little I understood of the presentation this morning, especially because of the JSON formulation and so on. Well, maybe I'm the only one, but I just wanted to say that in particular for something that's as important as this, I think the whole working group really needs to understand it, and I'm hoping that well, I did look at the draft just earlier, maybe 30 minutes ago, it looks like I've seen IEEE documents that are a little bit of text and incredible numbers of tables of parameters. And so it's not really trivial to understand such things like that, especially because you spend all of your time trying to figure out what each one of the 173 different parameters actually means. So I'm not right now, I mean, again, I admit I'm behind on this development, but I, on average, don't find that such ways of specifying protocols is intuitively obvious.
Yeah, one Srigandavalli. I think that is an extremely complex work. Actually, I think if you look at the FPC document, and it's very lot of work went in, not from me, but from my co-authors, like Satara-san, Marco, Lily, and like it is a complex problem. I think what really helps is truly, I think working with everybody reviews and make some contributions and such makes recommendations as how we can improve the documentation. I think that would really help. But these guys have put in amazing amount of efforts.
I'm not saying that this is a result of laziness, not by any means.
Right.
I'm just saying that in other situations, I mean, if you tried to read all the information elements for GTP or some of these other documents, it's unbelievable. And it comes to the point where you cannot maintain in your mind a model that allows you to make sure it's all consistent. And in fact, maybe it's not. Maybe GTP is inconsistent. Who knows? I mean, who would ever be able to figure it out? So that's why I'm just suggesting that for something of such central importance for this working group, almost everybody has to agree that they understand it.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So go ahead.
Lyle Burt, Sprint. First off, I'd like to blame Shri for anything with respect to the document, just so that's out there. Secondly, you're absolutely right, because as part of this work, we had to look at GTP. We obviously look at PMIP and IP mobility in general, and so it's definitely non-trivial, no matter how long you've been doing this. And that's part of the reason that it stimulated us over at Sprint to do the implementation, just because we felt the risk required us to really push ahead and start mitigating. And it's part of that work and Satura-san's work that we're able to coalesce to a few concepts. And I think also as well, that's why we saw the two models diverge temporarily. Really reflecting the different philosophies. And I think, we had a question earlier about, is this similar to a MIB? I've done MIB work. I would even argue it's even worse than a MIB. So if you think of your worst nightmare, right, bringing in GTP IEs and MIBs and then trying to actually meet a little bit of call processing capability, this is really that kind of work. But I feel at this point, based at least from my confidence in the implementation, as well as the expertise of the co-authors that I'm working with, that we have a good way forward and we've simplified to the concepts. Now, to be fair, as well, right, we just got this done this week. What I think we need, as you're telling the rest of the working group, is more eyes. What I also hope we're able to deliver, the Yang model is ancillary in my mind, but what I hope we're able to deliver in the text are much simpler concepts than have been provided to us, especially from a lot of those tech specs that we have to stare at, that are in some cases quite painful, no matter what time of day you're reading them. But we do, to your point, we do need everybody's help on this to get this solid and get this straight and get this efficient, because depending on how you implement, whether it's over the wire as in mode 2, or whether we actually run it through like an SDN controller with a formal Yang model, we want to make sure it's absolutely consistent for all implementers. So I can't emphasize enough that we need everybody's help. Thanks.
All right, thank you. So as I said earlier, that we have some kind of cleaning of table stuff going on, which is kind of then mostly of the concern of the working group chairs, me and Dapeng, to kind of push the documents out of the working group. And that's mostly like a process thing, very exciting, but we need to do that. But parallel to that, So so that's not supposed to kind of hinder the or stop the other work. So because we are just doing that in a parallel. So the question really is like what next, what else? So there's already been a couple of topics that came out, like anything new that we need. Okay, the new is kind of, it depends from where you look at it. But like new work, for example, that there was a host and the host was killed. So like a kind of thing that we need to do something. One thing, for example, as a concrete example that came up is like the actual on-wire protocol between the network and the host, bringing this coloring information about the prefixes and addresses and stuff like that. That's one thing. Or do we kind of, that kind of work can be seen as an extension of the just adding a milestone. It kind of fits into the bucket that we have today. And the what was also brought up is like we might need to do work on the on-wire formats for the models that we have. So that's again kind of extension of the existing charter. So you just put the new milestones. The other thing is like we can actually recharter and add more concrete goals what to do next, or the then the of course the worst case is then that the someone above our decision level says that no way, not anymore. So just like this is the discussion that I want to have now. I admit that I didn't kind of advocate this in advance, basically because I thought that the just to let you kind of be in a working mode and initiate the discussion today and come back that on the mailing list and for the next meeting and so on. And the kind of whatever I collected here, something like the potential or resurrected work, whatever we still have in a kind of vicinity. But what I want to say is something like that we should kind of, okay, we still have the kind of maintenance burden of the mobile IP. Hold and behold, that is still deployed. So there might be something coming up. I really don't want to see new work items on the someone wanted to extend proxy mobile IP or mobile IP for something new. There must really be a good reason to do that. So you need to demonstrate the product need. Fixing bugs is okay, but we really need, if we bring up something new work or recharter, we really need to kind of bring in like new stuff, something that actually also like matters. So it's like it's always asking for the who is the customer, is their need. Sometimes there's a good thing to do kind of proactive work if you really know that something is needed by the other side of the industry. But of course, as we know by history that you really need to get a real pull for somewhere to get some IETF technology to be deployed. And the demonstrating this kind of need always help. But the, yeah, you know the story.
Okay, so Suresh Krishnan, AD hat on. This is all fine to have, but I don't want to have this discussion now. So personally, I want all the items gone before any of this comes up. Okay. Because the speed at which this working group has made progress concerns me. Okay. So if you add like new items, Shri, I'll finish. Yeah.
No, I'm not saying anything.
So she's like, oh no, I'm like working really fast. Like, but yeah, it's like right. So I would like to see like at least like the cleaning the table right before any of this comes up. And I'm personally open to like all the three options you showed. Okay. But I would like the table cleaned before this comes up, or at least like just like still documents up for adoption, work items not without a working group document, right? So I want those at least gone. When they are going into last call, maybe we can start discussing it.
Okay, so your definition of clean table is that they are all heading out.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
So
Because,
expect
like,
a very aggressive working group last calls.
What? Yeah. So
Yeah, anyway.
look at working group last calls, see how many reviews we get, right? And see how they go through the IESG. Because just taking new items is not going to give more reviewers, right? Like so, and actually it might reduce the reviewer pool because they might be like working on as an author on another draft. So that's my concern. So that's why I don't want to have this discussion now. Okay,
Yeah.
personally, okay, you're free to have that discussion, but like I won't like handle it.
Okay,
much.
but this is the thing that you brought it up here is exactly what I wanted to hear, like as a next step. And now we have people there with an opinion. So
Okay, I'll just stick around here in case you want to beat me up, but I'll stick around.
yeah, that we will do anyway.
Yeah, one comment to Suresh is like on the pace at which this initially the group was all over the place, right? Essentially, there was no convergence for 2 years. But if you look at the last 1 year, there's an agreement, an architecture agreement, right? At least the proper documents are in place, right? Whether they're adopted or not, at least there's agreement from all the folks, right? I think what is important is I think we need to just make sure that, people are not thinking this is like a done group or something. It's like shutting down in a quarter or something, right? I think if we can just send the proper message, that will be good. But I think it makes sense. I also agree with you. Like, first let's clear the table and then we talk about the.
As I said, like I'm open to like the other options, right? Like than closing, but I'm just, I want to see the work cleared out, right? So that everybody gets cycles, right? Like I know, like you said, like Marco and Lyle and Satoru-san are working hard, right? Like let them get this thing out of the plate and then go ahead to this other thing, right? Because if you have this on your plate, like that means they're not reviewing somebody else's document, right? Like so, and so get that out of the plate and then we go and look at other stuff.
Okay. Thanks.
Danny?
Okay, I agree with that. I went to the mic when I saw call it a day for DMM. We still have a lot of work.
It's still an option, right? Like so.
Okay, I think we need more milestones for the existing charter. We don't need new stuff in the charter, but we have a lot of things that we didn't complete.
So that was option 1, like in Yoni stuff.
So like control data separation, we didn't complete. On demand, we didn't complete.
Email, discuss on email, right? We're not going to agree on it now, right? Like so, like
Right,
it's fine.
right.
Like
But
put in the new items, like get some.
Oh no, these are not new items. These are existing items we need to complete. We just need new milestones because we don't have those. Now, other
But
than
new items, I mean new milestones, right? Because he still needs to like go and get them and get them approved by me at the end, right?
So,
Because
for
without
example,
that,
to complete the control and data separation document, do we need to go through you?
okay, if it's something in the charter which needs to add a milestone, it still needs to go through the approval process, but not a re-charter process. So Yoni and Dapeng still need to go in, add something in there, and I had to look at it and approve, right?
Okay.
And I'm saying like without like the current stuff getting done, I will not approve like new
Okay.
stuff coming through.
So, okay, so my feeling is we still have work
Because
to
you're
do.
still Danny, right? You have another thing to finish. So finish
Right.
that first and then put the other thing on the table, right?
Okay, I want to be able to, I want the opportunity to finish.
So yeah, so the thing is also like from experience, like you are now entering a phase that you can see that there's a light at the end of the tunnel of doing something else. You can already start preparing for it. That you don't work in a serial manner, so you can build the stuff for the so that you have something concrete. If and when we reach the point that we really check that what we are doing next and what is the next item, if you have complete work there, it always helps. Of course, there's a threat that is a wasted effort if he decides differently, but that's kind of, you need to take that risk.
Okay. I think I would be more comfortable if we are like one meeting cycle away from that point, but I don't believe so. Okay,
Yeah.
so there's a draft that has not been updated, like Marco's and Lyle's draft, like that has not been updated in a meeting cycle. So usually in IETF terms, like a slow working group is like one which updates drafts only per meeting cycle, right? But this one was updated for the last cycle, not for this one. Like you said, took a long time. Not criticizing, I know like it's tough, right? But I'm just saying we are more than one meeting cycle away from closing this stuff out. So that's why we can do that in parallel, but it's too far in advance to figure that out. Okay.
Marco Liebsch, so regarding the things that are still on the table, I fully agree, and I blame myself a little bit to not be more active in reviewing other drafts to progress this more quickly. Regarding things that are on the table very long, such as the FPC work, I think it's something new that came to DMM. So far we worked on extensions to PMF mobile IP, which was more the horizontal way, right? So now we are looking vertically, which was new to the working group. So we had a steep learning curve on that.
That's fine.
Right? But having that knowledge, I think we have things that we can complete now as you proposed it, but then we have tools to really address these items here. And I think looking at these bullets, mobility for 5G, IoT, I think there are many customers, in particular 3GPP, looking at next generation. So I think also looking around in the IETF, the DMM working group is a perfect platform to address many of these items here.
Yeah. So from my point of view, I just did this very small scan about what is stuffing up going around. I was surprised, like I thought kind of I had this naive idea that the mobility as a concept is dead, but more and more people are working on it again. They just view it differently and for different use cases, but they always fall back to the same things like I need my end host to move from here and there. End host happens to be something, for example, inside a data center or whatever, it's a task, whatever. But they're still fiddling with the same problems, but they try to solve it differently, not tunneling, translation, whatever they have, ID locator split. But it's still there.
Okay.
They just work on in their own respective areas or have their individual drafts shopping around.
Okay.
But whatever.
So I have a suggestion, okay? So if you're interested in like doing like, let's say call it next gen mobility or something, request a mailing list, non-working group mailing list, okay? Grant it to you, okay? Just take the discussion there, but not in this working group yet, okay? Let the working group make progress on its milestones, get it done, bring the stuff in here.
That's clear, but if the current milestones are closed, so you don't see this happening in the DMM follow-up, or you run?
No, I'm not saying that at all. But I want the current milestones
It's
done.
just about the discussion. To have it
I
isolated
want it done. I don't want the working group to go off like, hey, new thing, let's go work on it. And then everything just stays on. Because like the second you put 5G on something, right, everybody's going to just move on there. Okay, like all this, your draft will not get a single review afterwards, right? Because everybody's like, there's going to be 7 drafts for 5G mobility, and everybody's going to like start reading the other people's drafts and trying to figure that stuff out. Nothing will happen to the current milestones. That's my fear. Like I'm happy to be proven wrong, but like we've seen this pattern. Like we've been in this mobility thing for like way too long, all of us, like in here, right? Like, so we know the pattern, and I think it's the wrong thing to do, okay? But as I said, like I'm willing to be proven wrong. If all these documents finish working group last call by like Seoul, let's have that discussion in the DMM meeting, right? I just think it's a low probability of happening, but that's fine too. If that happens, let's have that in Seoul. Let's have the discussion in Seoul, or even before, whenever the documents get cleared out, let's have that discussion.
I think I got your point.
Charlie?
Hi, I'm Charlie Perkins. I think that I'm just going to make a little thought experiment. Let's say that we finished all the documents by Seoul or sometime before the end of the year, and then we said, oh, now we can work on 5G, and we look at 5G and we realize, well, this forwarding plane thing doesn't meet our needs for 5G. Then what do? Start over again? I think that the whole point of DMM from the very beginning was because we were guided by what we perceived to be, the future of mobility management, and a really important component of that is 5G. Well, since then we've had a lot of cloud and who knows what IoT really means, but in particular, I think that somehow we ought to pay attention to what the world expects from 5G and make sure that our work is meeting that need.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So that's one way to go forward, but I still wouldn't allow new work, right? If you think like 5G stuff is going to affect the current documents, I'm going to keep all the current documents pending in the working group until somebody does an evaluation. So what I don't want happening is like some shiny new stuff that people start working on. So what you say makes perfect sense, but the right way to do that is make sure that like we somehow figure out what the 5G requirements are, which I don't know, like there's no stuff we got from 3GPP or IEEE. It's still pending in both of them, right? Okay, so the option is to wait for all these documents for that to finish, right? Which I don't think is reasonable. If you think it's reasonable, that's fine too. But neither of these justify starting new work on 5G mobility at this point.
So, yeah, so one thing, if you go and read 23799 and go for what they call these KPIs and different stuff there, you can see that what they have. I'm not now advocating 5G. I will follow exactly what Suresh is going to say, obviously. But the thing is that a lot of things that we have been doing here, you can find the same concepts in there. Just like then a matter of like whether it's actually a match in a practical terms. But the idea is that this extremely fast moving working group has been doing for a while. You can find those exactly same things there. So they have the concept of the like on-demand mobile. They have the kind of anchor distribution. They have the control per user per separation. All this stuff is there.
So I'm sorry, it's present in where?
3GPP TS23799.
Yeah,
that's what he's saying. But yes.
Well, okay, so sure. I mean, 3GPP is, you might say, leading the field in 5G, and they have a lot of vectors pushing in the same direction. But nevertheless, I think IETF has a lot to say about this. And if our work can be shown to be relevant, it'll make a huge difference in the acceptance of what we've done.
Yeah. That's fine, Charlie, right? But what I don't want to happen is like we wait on these documents for 5G, right?
No. Wait is a bad word.
Okay.
It's a 4-letter word, and I don't want that word.
Okay.
But I'm just saying that we have to be careful about this.
So send a proposal, right? Like, so if your proposal is like we need to somehow cross-check with 5G and make sure our stuff makes our needs, that's done by review of the current documents with like some other information you might have from some other source, and that's perfectly fine, right? But if it's saying like, okay, this stuff is lacking, I want to do some new work, that has to happen after these things are done. Yeah, that's it.
Okay, there's 5G mailing lists or 5GA and whatever IP and so on. So I mean, and in IEEE, there's a huge effort to make sure that 802 wireless is relevant for 5G and so on. Yeah. So there's all these places where extremely good work is being done, and I just don't want it to be that our work is left out.
That's fine, Charlie. Yeah, makes sense. So, so if this is like about better communication, I think we'll work that out, right? Like, so there's going to be this, as you know, there's going to be this IETF IEEE leadership meeting in September, and then that's something we can bring up over there. So you can probably like put together a bunch of slides or whatever to show to those people, or send like a LS or something saying like, hey, this is like work and this seems relevant to you. That's fine, right? And then probably we can get more reviews from them or comments from them, or say like, oh, this doesn't meet our needs. I think that's more useful at this point rather than like saying like, oh, we'll do new stuff. And that's what I'm concerned about. Like,
okay, so I think I fully agree with what Suresh said, that we should finish our existing document and finish our milestone. So I really encourage the members in this working group to participate in discussion more actively and to help to review the document. And then in the same time, I think we can trigger some discussion in the mailing list if you have concrete ideas.
Sure.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yuval from Sunrise. So regarding the 3GP issue, so the SA2 group, which is architecture, they're pretty much finalizing the requirements. And I've seen an email from the CT4 group, which are actually doing implementation on wire protocols, and they're actually contemplating IETF protocols as one of their options. So they have a list of options of things of how to do this user, they call that control user plane separation protocol, and one of them is IETF protocol, and I think they listed NetConf as their option, but they probably haven't
dealt. That's also an IETF protocol.
Right, but they probably haven't delved into the details and to understand exactly what's going on there. So they're opening the gate for us. We should really step in.
So what exactly is your suggestion, right? Like, so if you're saying like we send a liaison to SA2 or CT4, we can do that, right? Like, so we have a communication link. So the working group sit down and write a liaison statement. I'll send it off.
Also, as said before, review the SA2 requirements to make sure that we're not too off saying, well, you did a nice job, but this doesn't match our requirements.
Okay. And so do you go to the CT4 meetings, you all, or?
No, I went to the SA2 meeting. I can go to CT4
So
as well.
I have an action item for you. So it's like really good to have. So what happens in the way, like I think like bunch of us have actually done this before, is that you go to 3GPP, like say like this draft, put in a dependency. Let's say like you take Lyle's draft, right? Like and put it as a dependency in a 3GPP list. There's actually a spreadsheet that tracks IETF dependencies for 3GPP. So if you get on that list, then like 3GPP knows this is there. It's like 3GPP is watching kind of thing. And it signals to the IETF that there's like an interested consumer on this. So that's like some action that comes from the other side. Okay. So we can do the LS, like, okay, so we can have a LS for the next SA2 meeting, if possible, if the working group comes up with something. But then your job is to make sure it gets added. Just like Jörg Meyer from Huawei, who's the liaison on that direction, right? Who can add it to the dependency list. And then like we know that 3GPP is interested in this document.
Okay, but that always requires that someone or some employer, even we have individuals, someone still funds us, that they have interest on the 3GPP, for example, in 3GPP or IEEE side, doing the thing. Yeah, I know, yeah.
He volunteered.
Thank you. Anyway.
Just one comment. I completely agree with you, Suresh. I think the liaison is a very good idea, right? I think probably what we can do is proactively ask 3GPP. We can say that, we are working on this document. We believe it's relevant to you. Can you guys provide us some feedback? Whether is it in line with you or is it not? Right? Sure. If they say we don't care about it, then we can. That's useful too.
Sounds
right?
good.
So,
yeah, please. Yeah. So Yoni, Dapeng, can you sit down, like work on something to send off to them in the next couple of months?
Yeah. Yeah, I will wait for two things, because especially for the CT4 work on the CP and DP separation that is going on and not going to be concrete. So we would need the 0.4 version and the deployment model to be working group items. So that makes a sense. So, and because honestly, before we have the network host communication part as a working group document, or at some level, that's the kind of most concrete word at the moment that kind of fits in a purpose what they are doing.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks. So work on it, like send it off. We'll ship it off.
Yeah.
I have to go, so if
you are free to go. Thank you. So. Yeah. So it's 11:57. We still have 33 minutes, so we can fill our thumbs for half an hour or go away. But so anyway, I call the day for today for this meeting. So thank you for attending. There's a lot of work ahead of us. Me and Dapen, we try to work as fast as possible to get all the adoption goals done and all this other stuff so that we can move forward. And on the then the rest of the group, you need to do also your part. So thank you, and we see in Seoul in November.
thank you, Suresh.
So what I love is when it's working, and then you haven't changed anything, you come back in, you just go.
No, like I was using the flow program thing.
Oh yeah.
And then like I wrote everything, and then like 1 month later, it's something. I'm not saying that I know like
I hope so. I'm not sure. Because the HCD, I got some reviews. And stateless. You see the what you wanted is to write a new these documents define the container for options. So now we need to write another document which fills the container on the line. So this is what it's not considered